Participate in a conversation with once conservative, now liberal Midwest mastered prepared special education high school teacher and a self-proclaimed devil's advocate, East Coast conservative liberal, baccalaureate prepared registered nurse. These two strangers met, became instant friends, and realized their conversations are candid and epic. So join us weekly, ask us questions, and listen to these profoundly candid friends try to solve the world's problems, one discussion at a time.
Hey, welcome to another episode of The New Theory with Monet and Jared. That's AKA TNT with MJ. I am Jared.
And I'm Monet.
And together we are teaching minds
and nurturing souls.
Well, Monet, it's been still just a crazy week with all the stuff that's been going on. So many different topics, but it all spurs from the same movement, if you will. The stuff that's going on in Portland, Trump sending his civilian police force, this other stuff, stemming from the protests, peaceful protests, whether you want to argue with me on that one or not. You got direct reports and direct videos coming out of Portland, totally contradicting what's being said from our DHS director and Trump and all this other stuff. At any rate, from the peaceful protests as a result of George Floyd's death. So the conversation is still relevant. The conversation is still needed. So here we are, another week.
Again.
We're going to have the same conversation. But here's the thing. We keep talking and harping on education. So with that, we're learning new things, you and I.
Yes.
And I hope that people who are listening are learning new things on a daily basis as well. So with that, I've picked up a new book. We talked about that the other day.
Yes.
And there were some questions that got left unanswered or unasked last week. And so that's going to be the focus of our conversation. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. And
for sure.
And then I think there was a question that you had for me. So
yes, I'm going to start with that question that I have for you, considering I know what book you're reading. And I think it's very important that you talk about this book, because I think you can convey this message much better than I can. It is, my question is, what exactly is white fragility and how can it be remedied?
Okay. Really, really good question. And that actually is the book that I'm reading. It's called White Fragility. And it's written from, if I'm not mistaken, I think she's a psychologist. And has done workshops for sensitivity trainings and discrimination, anti-discrimination trainings and stuff like that. So a lot of talking about from her experience. These are things that she has encountered and stuff that I've encountered as well. But all that to say, it's a really great book, really great insight. And really, for me, the purpose of reading it is more to have a defense, if you will, to have an apology, much like your Christian apologies to defend Christianity as a faith. This, for me, white fragility, it would be the apology for discrimination and racism among whites. So with that being said, to answer your question, white fragility, a little bit of a loaded question. And we'll probably, during the course of our conversation, I'll probably point out, hey, that's white fragility. That's what that is. So, but for me, what I understand it to be, it's simply put, it's a discomfort or the discomfort a person who passes as white feels when the topic of race is brought up.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that we talk about. It's taboo. We just don't talk about it.
We were told.
We live in our bubble. We all have them. We live in our bubble. And the world around us is what is what we take in. That's our experience. That's how we learn. And so when your bubble is filled with the people that look like you,
that's all you know.
Bring it up.
Yeah.
So, but it goes also, it's more than that. It's that automatic fight or flight response that happens when race is discussed. For some, they will, by fight or flight, you're going to get defensive and say, well, I'm not racist. I'm not racist. I have black friends. I'm world traveled and I die. Whatever.
Yeah, right. My parents, my grandparents.
Yeah. I'm not, my parents taught me to love everybody and I'm a Christian and all this. So that's fight. Okay. Or flight. You just dismiss it. I'm not like that at all. We're good. Let's talk. How's the weather? You know?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two natural responses that are going to happen. But it's also, and I think this right here is more telling than anything, because that's why you get the fight. Because it's that feeling it's that feeling that a white person feels that the identity is being attacked or being, and so, or just when confronted with any kind of truth regarding racism, especially in relations to your U.S. history.
Our coveted U.S. history.
Right. It's heritage. It's my heritage.
Mm-hmm. We beat them. We won. It's it.
Yeah.
We won.
That's white fragility. It's that automatic defensiveness or that flight response, because one feels that their identity is being attacked or questioned anytime race is brought up. So to remedy that, and I wonder if this is kind of, I don't want to say I lost you yesterday when we were talking about it, but I kind of felt like I made you cringe a little bit with this next part. The remedy for this, for me, from what I understand so far, granted, is the reconciliation of being both a racist and a person.
Yeah.
So maybe some of our white audience right now are like, what do you mean I'm not racist?
I was about to say, come on, Jared.
Here's the deal. If you recognize that racism, not being racist, but racism itself, if you understand that on a much larger scale, that it is more than just interaction between people of different color, different ethnicities. If you understand that it's bigger than that, and it speaks more to a system of oppression that was set in motion 400 years ago and perpetuated throughout the years. In fact, I was just looking it up before we started this. I was looking up the Supreme Court ruling. I want to say it was in the early 1900s, but again, I have to go back and look. But there is a legitimate Supreme Court ruling that defines whiteness and sets it as the standard. Being white from that point on was the standard. That was the norm. And so your media, your commercials, your movies, your printed media, your printed text, anything that was published. I mean, you can look at it.
It had to reflect an ideology of whiteness.
That's my point. So if you understand that is what racism is, and then by default, because I'm the standard, my color is the standard, I'm a racist within the system.
I know, Jared. Now, for those that don't understand what Jared's saying, okay, you were born into a society that glorified your lifestyle.
Exactly. I am a product.
And yes, and because of
Go
that,
ahead.
everything else is abstract and not the norm. And what you feel as a person that's not white, okay, is like I see when I interact with white people, especially when I lived in the Midwest, it was like they were looking at me like, did I identify with them? And I never forget, I had this one girlfriend that talked about how she'd go to, when she was a teenager, she'd go to the lake and she'd hang with friends and, you know, they listen to music. And I'm like, yeah, when I lived in Philly, we hung at the park and we hung with friends and we had sleepovers. And she kind of looked at me and she was like, but my life, what we were doing was better, like normal. And I'm like, the reality is when you interact with other people other than your own bubble, and not just one or two races, I mean, but just needless to say, we're not going to, it's not a pissing contest.
No.
A child will laugh at the same thing. Why do children love Sesame Place? And you know, you name or whatever was popular during your children's reign of children, you know, being children.
Right.
So when you learn empathy, because that's really the underlying issue with white fragility. It's like we don't feel the same thing.
Right.
You know, I feel, you know, how I feel is the standard. How you feel is abstract. You know, we don't really get all crazy crying at funerals, but when I look at Blacks and Hispanics, they're falling all over the place. So they're not upset. No, they're just displaying it differently. But pain is pain. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you realize, like, I never forget during the first war in 2000, and I hate to use this movie as a reference, but it was Fahrenheit 9/11. And I was just watching it just for an observation point of view, but they showed the world in Iraq as, like, you know, they showed carnivals and they showed the people enjoying themselves and cooking and having parties and, like, you know, and going to work and just living. And Americans' ideology was they're oppressed. They're living a horrible life. They're under a dictator. And no doubt they weren't, but they were making the best of their situation. And here we go and drop bombs on them and, like, invade their lives. And they're like, oh, they're going to love us because we're helping them. And it's like, no, you know, a year or two later, they're trying to kill us because they want us to get out. Because they're like, we know what oppression looks like. We've lived through it. We lived through it, a dictator. We don't want another one. You know, and we don't want you guys raping our country for our resources. And the Americans are like, they're ungrateful. They don't. And I'm like, yo, I had empathy for them. Even though what happened, you know, we can say Saddam Hussein was like the worst. We don't know. We weren't over there. And I'm not saying that, you know, remember, I'm a conservative, liberal, Republican, whatever that is. Needless to say, it's like, you got to look at the whole picture. Right. You have to, you know, look at the people as a whole. And like, did we really help them? I mean, if we were helping them, it's like you see a fight, you break it up and you go home. You don't just stick around and follow the person that you just saved around. After a while, are you now their oppressor? Like, we as Americans have to think. We're not primates anymore. Think. So when we talk about white fragility, like you're saying, because, you know, remember, I'm dyslexic. So everything you say, I have to use your big words, Jared, and convert them into, you know, because I don't care how intelligent a person is. If it's foreign to them, you know, we got to break it down to the nanos. Because so that they can digest it better. So I'm not trying, what we're trying to say, and I know, Jared, because we've had, you know, we talk constantly. We're not saying that white people are fragile. We're saying that when it comes to this particular subject of racism and inbred discrimination, that you are totally oblivious to. Just like when we talk about it, like, white fragility was the first white people that came over and enslaved, the first European. We can't say white. We're going to say first European. Well, we can say white, but, you know, the Europeans that came over and enslaved the minorities, the Native Americans, and so forth and so on. They said, we need this. This is how we're going to advance ourselves. And then their children were born and they were raised into a society where these people were enslaved. And, you know, my father, my mother are the bosses. They inherited that position of being a boss. By the second and third generation, this was the norm.
Mm-hmm.
Life was the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it changed after the Civil War, which really didn't change, it's still like, remember, you still have a level. I was reminded by my ex-husband, who we talk about race all the time, being as though he's from Africa, okay? He was like, you understand, after the Civil War, the landowners got money from the federal government. The slaves got nothing.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, because they lost the property. They lost property. They lost income. They were able to take, their complaints to the federal government and say, hey, look, we had the Yankees come and steal this and this and this. And lots of people were paid off.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying. And then this is how all the other systems came into play, sharecropping and all this other stuff. So, which was like a
system of racism.
Yeah, it's more racism.
Yeah. And when I say that I can be a racist and a good person, my saying I'm a racist is only an acknowledgement of my part in the system.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's really it. Now, what that means for me as a teacher, now I have to really self-evaluate and self-reflect. And when and where did I inadvertently perpetuate racism within my own classroom with my own students?
That's scary.
I actually came up with some, what's real scary is I was able to recall that.
Wow.
Simple. I say simple. I don't want to be flippant or cavalier about
it.
Well,
you called it microaggressions.
Microaggressive speech.
Yeah.
Maybe
reverse psychology, Jared. Maybe it's a term. It's like a sense, like, I'll tell you in a heartbeat.
Well,
I love playing on people's ignorance. When I say I'm a mother of 4 children, I can't tell you how many black and white people you like. Or are their fathers involved?
No.
And I'd be like,
but that's still a microaggression. You're making that assumption based on a misconception.
Yeah.
It really is. You're black, therefore you have no dad. What?
Unfortunately, the norm is real, but
see, that's what happened when you ask that question. When that question is being asked, you're really implying.
That's a form of racism.
It really is.
Well, then, Jared, let's argue.
But then the remedy continues to go on to be an education.
Yeah.
Once you reconcile that because of your role in a system designed to keep your whiteness the standard and the norm, when you recognize that and reconcile that because of that, you're a racist by default. But does that make you a bad person? No. Your actions will make you a bad person if you're going to act on ignorance. But you're not inherently evil because you're a cog in a system. Yeah. So how do we fix that? We educate ourselves and we no longer become cogs. Yeah.
And you champion for the good. Now,
exactly.
we don't want people not asking questions, though, Jared, because then that puts you. So, yes, it's not wrong for people if you assume, because you don't know what to think, because societal standards and what is promoted. And I don't want to say media because we have social media, we have whatever. But when you come across it so many times, you are going to be like, hey, if you told me, knowing that I know you're from Arkansas, come on. Like, I could have come up with a whole bunch of, Southern references.
Oh, yeah, stereotypes, absolutely.
So, I mean,
I'm not married to my sister.
No, right?
In fact, I don't even have a sister.
Even though she's your cousin. So let me stop.
That's funny. And on that note.
Golly. I love her.
That's awesome. All right. Are you ready for your question then?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, let's keep this conversation going. All right, so I'm going to start with this one because you hinted towards it, you hinted about it earlier.
Yeah.
So my first question is, and I kind of know the answer to this, but for our audience who doesn't, but is there discrimination, which is, we've already decided that that's different from racism, because we're not talking racism when I say discrimination. Racism is a system, discrimination, and we can get into the vocabulary of that, but different thing. Is there discrimination within the Black community with the capital B? You know, is there, too light, too dark? I actually Googled this the first time I heard it, but I'd love to get more insight on it or more perspective.
Yeah.
Hotep, you know, can you speak to any of those experiences that you've had related to that?
Wow, I haven't heard Hotep in forever. All right, so we can go real far, quick back. You know, house slave, field slave. Why were the light-skinned ones in the house? Because they were the offspring of the slave owner. Because breeding, it's like if you can't get enough male slaves to mate with Black female slaves, then you just do it yourself.
Yeah.
It's true. So, and there's a plethora, and if they're young enough, they'll get pregnant quick. So, I mean, it's horrible. I have Irish descent based on this. This is not a dig to Irish people. I actually used to, you know, I have very close friends that are Irish, but the reality is I have Irish DNA. I mean, I'm brown skinned. Okay. I'm not light skinned, but my grandmother is of Hungarian Irish descent due to the fact that her mother, my great grandmother, whom I was blessed and fortunate enough to meet, who was born in the 1800s. Yes, she was. During Jim Crow sharecropping time, 1899, she was the product of a rape of an overseer.
Wow.
And my great grandmother, who was a direct slave descendant, her parents were slaves, and she was born after the Civil War, and she was raped, and my grandmother was a product in South Carolina. She moved up north, married an octoroon who was majority Hungarian, Ethiopian, which made my grandmother, who was a redhead, green-eyed devil. I mean, no. She was wicked. That's the only reason I'm calling her a devil. No, my grandmother was a good grand. I was blessed. I was blessed to have my grandmother because she wanted all of us to cook. She wanted us to sew. Like, I crochet, I knit. The woman wanted us, and I say it in jest, God rest her soul. I'm blessed to have had her in my life. And her story is just as unique. So we talk about complexion, of course. Like I said, you know, I never forget the first time, I think I was like 12 years old, and I was like, what is happening to your skin? It was peeling off of her. And I was like, what is that? She was like, it got burnt. It happens. Now, mind you, my grandmother loved taking us around and bragging and showing us all, like, these are my children. She married my grandfather, and I got beautiful pictures. I got pictures. Jared, did I ever show you pictures of my grandmother? Okay, anyway, I got beautiful pictures of my grandmother, my grandfather. She said that I married the blackest thing I could find. Well, because she was able to pass. My grandmother was able to pass, but she didn't
pass what?
Pass as white.
Okay.
See, in this picture, standing, oh, you can't, here we are.
I see it a little bit, yeah.
Hold on, because of the
oh wow, yeah.
Because the picture, because she's standing next to a black man, she looks black. But when she wasn't, she had red hair and green eyes. She was very pale. She was a very pale woman. And she was able to pass, but there were times she got caught, okay? And I think with that happening, she just said, I don't want my kids to grow up confused and living between two worlds. So she said, I married the blackest thing I could find, which ironically, my grandfather's people, again with the picture, hold on. My grandfather's people, my grandmother was a hairstylist. She owned like 7 shops, hair shops throughout the city. Throughout the city of Philadelphia. It dwindled down to 3. She married a man that worked for a trucking company, okay, who then he bought a fleet of 3 trucks and did everything from moving people to moving trash to moving, transporting products from one Black community to the other. Do you know what I'm saying? So they were affluent Black people. This picture is from, my grandmother was born in 1919. They got married in 1931. Okay. And that's their wedding picture. So, for them to get the picture and the dress, and she had like 8 bridesmaids. He had 8 groomsmen. It was a huge wedding in the 30s. Yes, though they were still doing it. Okay. They weren't suffering too bad. So wait, hold on. She was born in 1919, not 20. What am I talking about? Because she was 19 years old when she got married. So the math on that, because my mother was born in 42. So yeah, she got married, 1940. Get it right, Monet. But even still, so yeah, they wrong decade. Sorry, everybody. My point is, the color thing is huge, because that's essentially colorism. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. You're talking about, so, I said, the field slave. So what was more affluent, what is perceived as more affluent, and it's so antiquated. If we were having this discussion in the 80s, it would be dead on. Look at Prince and anything that was of a lighter persuasion, it's deemed more, aesthetically pleasing. But within the Black community, it was supported, but then that means light-skinned men don't have that much prowess as dark-skinned men. Huh. So then there's that colorism within the Black community with perceived, well, he's light-skinned, so he a punk. That's not the case. He's softer or she can't fight because she light-skinned. Do you know what I'm saying? Which leads insanity within the own community, because then you're having one perceive, and then just like my sister, God rest her soul, one of the love of my life, just in and out, through and through. She was 11 years older than me. You could not tell my sister she was light-skinned. She was light-skinned, but no one could tell her she was light-skinned. She would fight you. And she actually loved fighting people to prove how badass she was. Like, just because I'm light-skinned don't mean I can't fight. She was a badass. She was bad. She was. And of course there's pride in there, but now that I'm older, I'm like, no, we don't have to prove ourselves that way. There's a better way. We don't need to use that brawn, versus whatever. So, but at the time, you had to do what you had to do what you had to do to prove that you were superior to someone. And so, and then here I go, and I followed. You could tell the tide was changing in a sense, because I was like, well, I just like whatever, but it happens to the darker the berry, the sweeter the juice, in a sense. Whatever, the stronger the roots. I don't know. It's coming out, but. So it's like, but it all stemmed too from the fact that I wanted my kids to have authenticity. Is that wrong? But it's true. Like, we get into, so when you talk about the colorism, you talk about, are we African American? Are you Black? First of all, we're human and we're all American. And I mean, that's cute, right? That makes it all, apple pie. But the reality is we suffer from major identity crisis. Jared, Blacks suffer from major identity crisis. I got into it with these British Blacks. Well, what are you? Are you from like, Jamaica, Nigeria? I'm like, we don't know. We'll get it Forever 23. I'm not paying for that shit. Yeah. Okay? I'm not. The federal government owes me. So guess who's paying for it? I have no identity. There's African in me, 1,000%, no denial. From where, I don't know. And I mean, we hear say, like, I married a Ghanaian, and if you look at the phenotype of my grandfather, the picture that I just showed, that's a phenotype of a West African.
Sorry.
Huh?
Nothing. I thought you were about to explain to me what phenotype was. Like,
no. Please.
No, it's good.
Jared, now we really know who got the brains up in this operation. No, I mean, but no dig to myself. I do be stupid. I'm just the face. Anyway. My point is, even my ex was like, oh my goodness, like, he definitely, and there's a story about that with that I guess I shouldn't be proud to talk about, but I'll put it to you this way, that my grandfather's people prided themselves on keeping themselves authentic.
Interesting.
And that's not good, Jared, but
No.
that runs deep. So when I say, I made the reference, my kids like to call themselves Half-Africans because they're half American and half African for real. And they really are. They have ancestry that they can count back, to a certain. But back onto the colorism and the understanding about, what? Can you please tell people what you found Hotep meant?
Oh God, it's been a while. If I remember correctly, it's in Egypt. I'm just going to put it simply, Black Egyptians or Egyptians.
Oh yeah,
descendants from Egyptians. So.
Well, the thing is, you're grasping at straws when you got the Africans coming over here. Do you know what I'm saying? Not knowing indigenously. Like, I knew there were tribes in Africa. I didn't know how deep that was because there's tribalism. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a superiority in tribes within nations. So many different dialects, so many different, do you know what I'm saying? And identifying by your name, like, for instance, like I said, my ex-husband's from Ghana. He is an Ewe. Okay, they're more coastal. They know more the river. He'll talk about it. He's like, this tribal pride, but there is a sense of hierarchy. And he's like, sorry, honey, you didn't pick, one of the highest. No, but we have
That's
pride.
funny. I got no clout. Sorry.
Yeah, right. Sorry. But we love ourselves. That's good, right? But my kids, my daughters have 4 names only because he named my daughters, and my sons have 3 names. He's like, well, the boys will have 3 names like you. So one of their middle names with my girls is like a spiritual middle name, but it also identifies what tribe they come from. And then like their other middle name is the day that they were born. So I have an Ebina, I have a Yawu, I have a Ya, and I have a Kwezi. So I have 2 Thursday borns, I have a Sunday born, and I have a Tuesday born.
Cool.
Yeah. So I got, or did I get that wrong? I think I got 1 Thursday born. I forgot. I used to know it like, that. And then
you do well to remember their names on a daily basis.
Yeah, right. I'm like, you, come here.
Yeah.
Boy.
Whichever one you want, get over here.
That's right. Which is bad because it's true.
Yeah. Well, then you get an animal or you get a pet.
There
and
you
then
go.
Throw that in the mix. Yeah.
Oh, God. Oh, because that, trust me, you getting called the pet's name. You heard me.
And the pet's being called the kids' names too.
There you go.
Dang it.
I told you.
Yeah.
But that's another form of psychological it needs to be addressed psychologically. And that all stems from self-love and learning self and knowing self and respecting self, because you have to love the skin you're in. And this is a retraining for the entire, you hear white people, red hair. I got red hair and freckles. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. God gave you a map on your face. You know what I'm saying? Like I could talk about this all day. Brunettes, short, tall. We really have to get into the love of self. Mm-hmm. And once you get into the love of self, it really helps span these conversations, and it helps, it helps us reach each other better, because then it shows empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do believe it's your question now.
Oh, my question. Ooh, let's see. Did I forget? No, because you sent it to me.
I sent you a couple of things. I can't remember which one you wanted me to add. What one? So
I said, I think it has something to do with my kids and the conversations I have with them. Okay, so I believe my question was, what are your conversations like about what the current climate is in the country with your children?
So if you were to ask me this last week, my answer would be a little bit different, because at that point we'd only had maybe 1 or 2 conversations about race. In fact, I had we read as a family, oh God, what is the name of that book? How to talk about race or something.
Yeah.
Book that Kendi wrote for this book for his kids. The author of How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Oh.
He wrote a children's book dealing with racism, and so my wife and I, we bought that for our kids and we read it. In fact, had a couple of family members ask if I could forward it to them too. And so I was able to share that with a couple of family members as well. So it was,
yay!
So that's how we really kind of started the conversation, really getting the conversation going. And then simply just asking, do you see any of that at school? You know, have you seen it? You know, what experience have you?
What was it like?
Yeah. And they tell me, you know, of course, they don't experience them themselves, but they've seen it. You know, kids of color being treated unfairly. You know, Mexican, you know, I don't want to say Mexican, but it doesn't
Hispanic.
matter. You know, Latinx, Black, you know, just whatever, being treated unfairly. And so then I asked them, how does that make you feel? I don't like it. I don't think it's right. And then just asking, well, is there anything that you can do to help next time if you see it next time? And the answers that we got were basic, you know, just being there for them, going, you know, you know, if it's student on student, you know, then perhaps my daughter can go to the kid being victimized and just be a buddy to them. Hey man, how are you doing? That's good to see. You know, is this guy giving you a hard time? I'll come this way. You know, whatever. I didn't see that.
Thanks.
But then there's times where the conversations get a little bit more intense.
What?
Of what we're seeing on the news.
Yeah.
And now the conversation is more, yeah, we're still asking, we're still talking about it, but it's more of a, we need you to understand this. We need to know what's going on. We need you to know that you're born privileged, and we want you to learn how to use that privilege to help those being victimized and how you can do that. And, you know, even was talking with, phrasing this to our daughter, and she's 10, asking her if she's seen any teachers or principals treat kids of color differently or unfairly. And she said, yeah, I've seen it once.
Wow.
Really?
Because kids don't know what prejudice or racism is.
Until
they're taught it. Literally, they know what different is.
And they know what unfair is.
Yes, and they know what unfair is. And until, I'm serious, like, you know, if you have, hello?
Yeah,
sorry.
You good?
If you have two toddlers playing, and they may not know each other at first, but if you give them each a toy and you snatch one, you snatch it from the white one.
Mm-hmm.
The black one's gonna be like, yay, you know, that's not fair. They know that.
Yeah.
It's until their families like don't play with that person, or that person's different, or they don't even have to have a direct, you know, contact with the racial incident. They can just hear their parents talk about it. Like, those people are, and then they'll look and say, oh, those people? Okay. And they'll make the assumption. So it literally has to be like, my kids, if I go to my 7-year-old, being as though they're raised Jewish, so they worship with white people. They go to school when we lived in Missouri with white people. But they go around their family who's black. Yes, they are oblivious until they hear their mother have these conversations like that's wrong, but with corrective measures. You know what I'm saying? Like they hear me talk about like, I'm going to talk to your Uncle Jared today. You going to go talk? Okay, Mom. Like, we're having. Well,
what?
My daughter just text message.
Oh, okay. I was like, what are you staring at?
I know.
Well, speaking of daughter, we've got a few more minutes. You got the last question, or you get the last answer.
Okay.
And I struggled with how to phrase this, but it is what it is.
They're gonna make it quick.
Yeah. Basically, the question is this: what's it like being a Black mother in our today's society? Let's see.
FYI, I begged Jared to ask me this question. So. He was like,
I've been wanting to ask you. I've been wanting to ask you this anyway. I've been wanting to ask you this for a while. So, but so you said something during a conversation yesterday about Black rules, and so I was wondering if you could speak to more on that. And is that part of the talk, or is that a separate thing?
So I think white America is understanding that there is dialogue within the Black household with how to conduct yourself in this, this white world. And, I think you guys have heard that enough, but the dialogue goes deeper in my home purpose because I have a 16-year-old son.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we look at the atrocities happening across the nation, whether you're Black or white, Hispanic, whatever, if there are no fathers in the home, okay, and this is like I said, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, if there are no fathers in the home, the children are more likely to, and go down the list, okay? And we're not talking about like, okay, so there's a man in the house, he's a father. You have to be involved. This is like, I'm taking you to sporting events, I'm spending quality time with you, like walking. Like I had two fathers, okay? I had a stepfather, I had my biological father, and my mom was married to a man before she married my father. She had 3 children. That man even considered me a father. So, I mean, I considered him a father. He considered me a daughter. Sorry. Right. So with that being said, I mean, I was surrounded by amazing role models. I think that attributed to the fact that I got married at 21, because it was like, I was a princess. I was a queen. Like my fathers weren't having it. Okay. I was crazy, but they were like, you gotta get married. So, like, you ain't gonna be running around here without no responsibility. So, and I'm blessed because of having that foundation. I was already magnetized. I was already charged to marry quality. Do you know what I'm saying? So with that being said, the problem within all of these communities, lower socioeconomic minority communities, is the fact that, and that includes white, there's no representation of a real father. So the conversation I have with my sons, this is what a man is, okay? If you're gonna lay with someone, you better find quality. We're not looking for chicken heads, and we're not glorifying those relationships. We're not glorifying instantaneous gratification, because that's essentially what it is. And I'm not going to deny you what you're most likely going to do, because I don't know too many teenagers that, were holier than thou. I do know a couple that waited till college, but we live in different times now. Okay. And the obstinance for some is not the norm. I'm not saying that kids can't hold out, because kids do. Okay. And that much respect. We want that, but we live in a world where I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. So for my son, I told him, you have a heightened responsibility. Thankful, he brags that he's still a virgin because he's my son. That's why he does it. He's a weirdo. But when that time comes and he makes that choice, I want him to make a choice with quality. And we as parents, especially in these lower socioeconomic communities, we have to teach our children, no, you absolutely would not bring crazy into this house. Yes, for the majority of their lives, even though they had both their parents, they've really seen a lot of their mother, okay? Their father was always working and doing stuff. So that's where their work ethic comes from. But I really need my kids to understand, all kids, all boys, you have a heightened sense of responsibility. Yes, and the responsibility falls on the girls too. You can't mess with somebody that ain't about nothing. Does he have a 5-year plan? What are you doing with your life? So, I mean, and then how to hold yourself and how to be, respectful of others, how to communicate effectively with people. You can't say, get to the point. That's a direct quote from my father. Get to the point. If you have something to say, talk directly to it. Don't beat around the bush. Right. So it's like, and their father said, well, their father is a man of very, very few words. So trust me, when he opens his mouth, it's literally directly to the point.
Right on.
Just like you, Jared.
I try. Though I do like
you do it, brother.
I do like to hear myself speak, so I might ramble for a while. But,
We all do.
No, that is something I'm working on, is the whole direct communication.
No, you got it. No, that's how we became friends, period. That was it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, I do believe that is our time for today.
Yeah.
We're right about 45 minutes. So
we have a guest.
Yes. Next week, we have our first guest, Mr. DeAndre Jones from Fayetteville, Arkansas, is going to be joining us. Political activist here in the community. So we're looking forward to hearing from him. And then Monet and I'll be looking into doing a town hall discussion in the next couple of weeks, or in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Still looking into that. Not still looking. We're going to make that happen.
Yes, we're going to make it happen. So we're going to start soliciting email addresses and have you send it to and we need an equal number of conservative Republicans or All Lives Matter. We don't know which avenue we're going to go first, and an equal number of Black Lives Matter and liberal Democrats.
Sounds like a fun conversation.
It is.
And with that, guys, so if you want to be a part of that, or if you have questions about that, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter or on Facebook, TNT.
Are we still doing YouTube? Are we uploading these videos?
We are on YouTube. I do have that YouTube page. I've got to get the videos up there. But
okay.
We are on YouTube as well. You can
just a minute.
Podcast on Google Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes. We're working on iTunes. So you can pretty much find us anywhere. And then definitely email us, tntwithmj@gmail.com. That's TNTHMJ@gmail.com. And then you can Facebook, social media, all that good stuff. So last word, Monet.
Nope. Everybody take care of themselves. Don't fall into anger. Live in love.
Amen. Till next time.
Till next time. Have a good day.